The dusty road to Whispering Pines Ranch stretched before Maya like an unwritten story. At 17, she stood alone with nothing but a creased deed in her hand and the weight of her Apache heritage in her heart. The lawyer had warned her. This inheritance from a great-uncle she'd never met was likely worthless. Just a rundown property forgotten by time. But as Maya pushed open the weathered gate, a soft whinny caught her ear. Behind the main house, past overgrown fields, stood a barn door slightly ajar. What she discovered inside would forever alter her path. Good, a girl who'd spent her life in foster homes, possibly saved 200 abandoned animals when she could barely care for herself. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The midday sun beat down on Maya's shoulders as her old pickup truck rattled along the dusty road. 17 years on this earth, and everything she owned fit in a single duffel bag. The social worker's last words still rang in her ears. It's probably worthless, but it's legally yours. Maya checked the crumpled directions again. 20 miles past the reservation, another 8 down a county road that barely deserved the name. The truck's air conditioning had died 3 summers ago, leaving the windows down as her only relief from the Arizona heat. Dust coated her skin, working its way into the corners of her eyes. When she finally spotted the weather-beaten mailbox, Whispering Pines. Wrench carved into wood, so faded it was barely legible, Maya felt something unexpected, a flutter of hope. She turned onto a narrow drive lined with twisted juniper trees. The main house appeared first, a single-story adobe structure with a sagging porch and shutters hanging askew. Beyond it stretched fields bordered by broken fences, and further still, the silhouettes of several outbuildings. Maya parked and sat motionless, gathering courage. A small wooden box rested on the passenger seat, the only thing she had from her grandmother. Inside lay a faded photograph showing a young Apache woman holding an infant. Maya touched the image gently. "Well, I'm here, Mom, somehow." The lawyer had explained how her mother's uncle, a man Maya had never met, had left her everything upon his death 3 months ago. No one had expected it. No one had wanted it either, apparently. As Maya stepped from the truck, the silence struck her first. After years in crowded foster homes and group facilities, the absolute quiet felt alien. Then came a sound, soft at first, then unmistakable. A horse's whinny. Following the sound, Maya circled behind the house. A large barn stood 50 yards away, its red paint long surrendered to the elements. As she approached, more sounds emerged, shuffling, snorting, the pouring of hooves. "They're hungry." Maya startled at the voice. An elderly man leaned against a fence post, watching her. His weathered face suggested decades under the southwestern sun. "Who are you?" Maya asked, instinctively stepping back. "Joe Tanner. Run the place next door." He gestured vaguely westward. "Known your great-uncle Frank for 60 years. The man studied her face. "You got his eyes. Same shape? There are animals here?" The lawyer said the place was empty. Joe shook his head. "Frank was a private man, especially these last years. Didn't want county officials knowing his business." He pushed himself off the post. "Come on. Might as well see what you've inherited." The barn door protested as Joe pulled it open. The smell hit Maya immediately. Hay, manure, animal sweat. As her eyes adjusted to the dimness, shapes materialized. Horses, at least a dozen, standing in stalls. Some turned curious faces toward the newcomers. "These are just the horses he kept closest," Joe explained. "Got cattle in the north pasture, goats too. Chickens in the coop behind the house. More in the other barns." Maya felt lightheaded. "How many animals?" "Last time Frank told me, about 200, give or take." 200? The number seemed impossible. Joe nodded. Frank couldn't turn away a creature in need. Started with a few rescue horses. Then people learned he'd take in anything. His reputation spread. Maya approached a chestnut mare who stretched her neck over the stall door. The horse's ribs showed beneath her dull coat, but her eyes were bright. "They need care," Joe said simply. "Feed, water, medicine for some. Frank's been gone 3 months. I've done what I could, but..." Maya stroked the mare's nose. "I don't know anything about ranching." I've never even had a pet. Frank left detailed journals. Instructions for everything. Joe gestured to the house. Question is whether you're planning to stay or sell. Maya thought of the group home she'd left that morning. The constantly changing roommates. The locked refrigerator. The social worker who'd called this inheritance her lucky break, with a tone that suggested the opposite. I don't have anywhere else to go, she admitted. Something like approval flickered across Joe's face. Well, these animals don't have anywhere else either. He pointed to a paddock where a black and white paint horse stood watching them. That one there was Frank's favorite, named Spirit, ornery as they come but loyal. The horse studied Maya with an intensity that made her shiver. It was as if the animal was judging her worthiness. I can show you the basics, Joe offered. Get you started. Maya looked around at the dilapidated ranch, the hungry animals, the magnitude of what lay before her. Everything in her life had been temporary. Homes, schools, relationships. Nothing had ever truly belonged to her until now. Yes, Maya said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. Show me where to begin. Dawn broke with a chorus of animal sounds that pulled Maya from a restless sleep on the old couch. She hadn't dared venture into her great-uncle's bedroom yet. That felt too intimate somehow. Her first night at Whispering Pines had been punctuated by unfamiliar noises, distant braying, occasional whinnies, and the persistent crowing of roosters that seemed to have no concept of proper time. Joe arrived as promised, his ancient truck kicking up dust as it rolled to a stop beside Maya's. He carried a large thermos of coffee and a leather-bound book tucked under one arm. Found this in my place, he said, handing her the book. Frank left it with me last time he got sick. Said to keep it safe. The journal was worn smooth from handling, its pages filled with neat, precise handwriting. Maya flipped through it, finding detailed notes on animal care, feeding schedules, medical treatments, and hand-drawn maps of the property. This is our first stop, Joe said, pointing to a notation on one of the maps. The back 40. The back 40 turned out to be a fenced pasture behind the second barn. As they crested a small rise, Maya stopped short. Dozens of cattle grazed on sparse vegetation, their ribs visible, heads lowered. Mostly rescued from drought-stricken ranches, Joe explained. Some from slaughterhouses. Frank couldn't bear to see them suffering. Maya consulted the journal. It says there should be 43 head, Joe nodded. Sounds about right. Might have lost a couple since he passed. They continued their inventory throughout the morning. Beyond the cattle pasture, they found a smaller enclosure containing 17 goats of various breeds and sizes. Behind the third barn, barely standing with its roof half-collapsed, were pens holding 34 sheep. The chicken coop housed nearly 60 birds, scratching and pecking at ground picked clean of anything edible. How did he feed them all? Maya asked, overwhelmed by the numbers mounting in her head. Grew feed on the east fields when he could. Bought the rest. Had some savings from his younger days. Joe paused. Toward the end, he started selling off his personal things. Then took loans. Maya's stomach sank. Loans? Bank's been patient out of respect, but they'll come calling soon enough. They found more animals as the day progressed. A pond on the northwestern edge of the property held ducks and geese. A special pen contained 3 elderly donkeys. Most alarming was a makeshift shelter where they discovered 4 malnourished horses that Joe hadn't been able to locate during his periodic checks. These need a vet, Joe said, examining their conditions. Soon, by late afternoon, they had confirmed the presence of 187 animals in total. Maya's hands trembled as she recorded the last numbers in a notebook. We haven't checked the far pasture yet, Joe said, pointing to an area marked on the map, but separated from the main property by a dried creek bed. Frank kept special cases there. The special cases turned out to be a small herd of mustangs, wild horses rescued from government roundups. Unlike the other animals, these showed no interest in human contact, keeping their distance as Maya and Joe observed them from the fence line. 14, Joe counted. That brings us to just over 200, like I figured. Maya stared at the mustangs, their wild beauty untamed despite their confinement. One stallion stood apart, watching her with wary intelligence. Something about his gaze reminded her of kids she'd known in the system, defensive, untrusting, expecting the worst. Why would he do this? She asked quietly. Take in so many when he couldn't possibly care for them all properly? Joe was silent for a long moment. Your great-uncle lost his wife 20 years ago. No children. These animals became his family. He gestured at the sprawling property. Each one has a story in that journal. Each one mattered to him. Back at the house, Maya sat on the porch steps as darkness fell, the journal open in her lap. She'd found an entry about the Mustangs, written in her great-uncle's steady hand, removed from their land, their families torn apart, their way of life destroyed. Sound familiar? I cannot give them back their mountains, but I can give them safety. Some wounds never heal, but they can be honored. She understood then, this wasn't just a collection of animals. It was a testament, a statement against forgetting. Her great-uncle had seen something of his own people's history in each rescue. Maya closed the journal and looked out at the darkening ranch. 200 lives now depended on her. 200 stories she was suddenly responsible for continuing. Tomorrow she would need to figure out food, water, veterinary care, and how to pay for it all. Tonight, though, she simply sat with the weight of her inheritance, listening to the night sounds of 200 souls that were now impossibly hers to protect. After Joe left with a promise to return in the morning, Maya stood alone in the center of her great-uncle's living room. Dust motes danced in the last rays of sunset, streaming through grimy windows. The house felt both empty and crowded with ghosts, not just her great-uncles, but all those who had come before. Maya finally worked up the courage to explore properly. The kitchen held ancient appliances, including a refrigerator that hummed ominously. Inside, she found only condiments and a half-empty carton of milk long expired. The pantry contained bags of beans, rice, and canned goods, basics that wouldn't spoil. At least she wouldn't go hungry tonight. She heated a can of vegetable soup on the propane stove and ate standing up, watching darkness claim the ranch through the kitchen window. The silhouettes of barns and fences transformed into mysterious shapes. Somewhere in the distance a coyote called and something answered. One of the horses, she thought. The bedroom beckoned finally, a mystery she could no longer avoid. Maya pushed open the door slowly, half expecting to find her great-uncle's body still there, though logic told her otherwise. Instead, she found a Spartan room with a neatly made bed, a dresser, and a small desk. No television, no radio, no modern distractions. On the dresser sat a small leather pouch adorned with beadwork in traditional Apache patterns. Maya's breath caught. She recognized the design from her grandmother's teachings years ago. With reverent hands, she lifted the medicine pouch, feeling its weight. The supple leather had been rubbed smooth by decades of handling. Maya carefully loosened the drawstring. Inside were several herbs, sage, cedar, and others she couldn't identify, along with a small carved stone eagle and what looked like a tuft of horsehair bound with sinew. She brought the pouch to her nose, inhaling deeply. The scent transported her instantly to her earliest memories. Her grandmother singing softly, burning herbs before dawn, teaching Maya words in their native tongue that she had since forgotten. How had her great-uncle come to possess this? Had her grandmother given it to him? Or had it been passed down from someone else in their family? The questions multiplied, with no one left to answer them. Maya returned the pouch to its place, suddenly aware she was an intruder here, despite her legal claim. She retreated to the living room and made up the couch with an old blanket she found in a closet. Sleep seemed impossible with the weight of 200 lives pressing down on her conscience. Outside, the ranch came alive with night sounds, the low murmurs of cattle, occasional nickering of horses, the rustle of chickens settling in their coop. 200 hearts beating, 200 bodies needing food and care. The enormity of it threatened to crush her. I can't do this, she whispered to the empty room. I don't know how. She'd spent her life moving from one temporary situation to another, never staying long enough to put down roots. What did she know about commitment, about responsibility on this scale? When sleep finally came, it brought dreams vivid enough to seem real. Maya found herself standing on a high mesa, the ranch spread out below like a miniature model. A figure stood beside her, an old woman wearing traditional dress, her face deeply lined but her eyes bright with intelligence. "Grandmother?" Maya whispered, though this woman was older than her grandmother had been when she died. The woman didn't speak, but pointed toward the ranch. As Maya watched, the buildings and fences repaired themselves, fields grew green, and animals flourished. The scene shifted to show children visiting, learning, their faces bright with wonder as they connected with the land and its creatures. Then darkness fell in the dream, and the ranch disappeared altogether, replaced by bulldozers and construction equipment. No animals remained, no trace of what had been. Maya jerked awake, heart pounding. The first pink light of dawn filtered through the windows. From outside came the demanding chorus of hungry animals, greeting the day. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. The dream lingered, more vision than fantasy. Two paths stretched before her, one of rebuilding, one of abandonment. Both seemed impossible in their own way. Maya's gaze fell on her duffel bag by the door, still packed. She could leave now, sell the property from afar. Let someone else decide the animal's fate. No one would blame her. A 17-year-old orphan had no business running a ranch. Instead, she rose and walked to the dresser where the medicine pouch rested. Her fingers traced the beadwork, feeling the connection to her past, to her people who had endured and adapted despite everything taken from them. "Show me how," she whispered. Though she wasn't sure who she was asking, her great-uncle, her grandmother, or something larger than either of them. Outside, a horse whinnied, close by, almost as if responding. Maya squared her shoulders and went to meet the day. Joe arrived as the sun cleared the eastern mountains, this time with a truck bed full of hay bales and sacks of feed. Maya had already been up for hours, having discovered that hunger made the animals vocal alarm clocks. "Borrowed these from my place," Joe explained as they unloaded. "Should last a couple days. After that—" He left the sentence unfinished, but the implication was clear. The morning disappeared in a flurry of basic lessons. Joe showed Maya how to distribute hay to the horses, measure feed for the cattle, scatter grain for the chickens. Each species had different needs, different behaviors. Maya's head spun with information. How did Uncle Frank manage this alone? She asked, leaning against a fence to catch her breath. "He didn't sleep much," Joe replied. "And he had systems. Clever ones?" He nodded toward the main barn. "Come see." Inside, Joe showed her a series of pulleys and chutes her great-uncle had rigged to move feed efficiently. Man was an engineer before he was a rancher, made one person's work doable. After feeding came watering, another monumental task. The ranch's main well pumped to several large tanks, but some watering stations required manual filling. By midday, Maya's muscles ached in places she didn't know could hurt. "You're doing well," Joe said as they paused for a quick lunch of sandwiches he'd brought. "But there's something you need to see." He led her to a shed attached to the house that she hadn't noticed before. Inside, shelves lined the walls, filled with bottles, bandages, syringes, and equipment she didn't recognize. "Medical supplies," Joe explained. Frank was practically a vet himself by the end. Had to be, with no money to pay for professional care. From a shelf, Joe retrieved a thick, well-worn book, the complete veterinary manual for livestock and horses. Opening it revealed pages dense with text and diagrams, margins filled with handwritten notes. "Your first homework," he said, handing her the book. "Start with the basics, recognizing signs of illness. You've got at least a dozen animals needing attention right now," as if to emphasize this point. Joe took her on a tour of the urgent cases: a horse with an infected leg wound, 3 goats with worrying coughs, a cow struggling to maintain weight, and several chickens with respiratory issues. "I know a vet who might come out," Joe said hesitantly, "might give a discount for the situation." The hope that flared in Maya died quickly when she called the veterinarian from her great-uncle's landline. The woman was sympathetic but firm. "I remember Frank," she said. Good man with a big heart but no business sense. His account is already past due $3,000. I can't extend more credit." Maya hung up, despair creeping back. "She won't come without payment up front." Joe nodded as if he'd expected this. "Let's focus on what we can do ourselves then. Start with that horse, Spirit. His leg needs cleaning." What followed was a crash course in basic animal medicine. Joe demonstrated how to approach the injured horse, how to clean the wound, how to apply antibiotic ointment. Spirit tolerated the treatment, though his eyes remained wary. "He trusts you," Maya observed. "Nope," Joe contradicted. "He's tolerating me." "There's a difference." Frank was the only one he trusted. By late afternoon, they'd treated the most pressing cases, using supplies from the shed and instructions from the manual. Maya's hands smelled of antiseptic and animal, a combination she found strangely satisfying. As Joe prepared to leave, he hesitated by his truck. "There's something else you should know." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "Property taxes are due next month." Frank was already behind. Maya stared at the notice. The amount would have consumed her entire savings, if she'd had any. "And feed," Joe continued. "What I brought won't last long. 200 animals eat a lot." "How much?" Maya asked, dreading the answer. Joe did some quick calculations. "Bare minimum. About $2,000 a month, assuming you do all labor yourself and nothing gets sick." The number struck Maya like a physical blow. $2,000 monthly. She had exactly $43 to her name. "I'll help where I can," Joe assured her, seeing her expression. "But I'm on fixed income myself." After he left, Maya sat on the porch, the veterinary manual open in her lap, trying to absorb the fundamentals of animal health assessment. The book's previous owner had filled the margins with observations, corrections, and additions, a secondary education written in faded blue ink. In the chapter on horses, she found a detailed note about Spirit, his rescue from an abusive situation, his medical history, his preference for apples over carrots. The handwriting revealed something of her great-uncle, methodical, observant, patient. A sudden commotion from the chicken coop interrupted her studies. Maya found a hawk attempting to breach the wire covering. She chased it away, then discovered a section of fencing that needed immediate repair. By sunset, Maya had mended the chicken enclosure, cleaned 3 more wounds, refilled water troughs that had mysteriously emptied, and memorized the signs of colic in horses and bloat in cattle, 2 conditions the manual marked as potentially fatal, requiring immediate action. As darkness fell, she collapsed onto the porch steps, muscles trembling with exhaustion. The veterinary manual lay beside her, dozens of pages marked for urgent review. In the distance, the silhouettes of animals shifted against the darkening sky. 200 lives. 200 responsibilities, $2,000 a month. Maya tilted her head back and looked at the stars emerging above the ranch. They seemed both comforting and mocking in their permanence. The land had seen countless struggles like hers come and go. What made her think she could succeed where even her experienced great-uncle had failed? Yet giving up meant surrendering 200 lives to uncertain fates. The thought was unbearable. With aching hands, Maya picked up the manual again and turned to the next chapter by the light of her phone. Tomorrow would come soon enough with its demands and crises. Tonight, at least, she could arm herself with knowledge. Maya was mucking out stalls in the main barn when she heard the vehicle approach. Not Joe's familiar rattling truck, but something newer, engine humming with authority. She set down her pitchfork and stepped outside, shielding her eyes against the morning sun. A white county SUV with official markings parked next to her pickup. A heavy-set man in a khaki uniform emerged, clipboard in hand. His expression soured as he surveyed the property. "Miss Yazzie?" he asked, consulting his clipboard. "Yes," Maya confirmed, conscious of her dirty clothes and the manure on her boots. "Carl Dawson, County Animal Control." He didn't offer his hand. "We've received reports of neglected livestock at this address." Maya's heart sank. "Reports? From who?" "That's confidential." His gaze swept past her to the visible animals. I'm here to conduct an inspection. For the next hour, Maya followed Dawson as he methodically documented conditions throughout the ranch. He noted the underweight animals, inadequate fencing, insufficient shelter, and limited water sources with grim efficiency. His camera clicked constantly, recording evidence of what he termed substandard care. Some of these animals need immediate veterinary attention, he stated, pointing to Spirit's infected leg and a sheep with visible respiratory distress. I know, Maya said. I'm treating them myself. I called the vet, but home remedies aren't adequate, Dawson interrupted. These animals require professional care. Back at his vehicle, Dawson produced an official-looking document from his clipboard. I'm issuing a notice of violation under County Code 12.4 regarding animal welfare standards. The paper trembled slightly in Maya's hands as she read. The language was dense with legal terminology, but the message was clear. She had 30 days to bring the ranch into compliance or face seizure of the animals and criminal charges for neglect. 30 days? Maya's voice cracked. That's impossible. I just inherited this place. Not my problem. Dawson's face remained impassive. The previous owner's death doesn't exempt the property from regulations. What exactly am I supposed to do? Maya asked, desperation creeping into her tone. Dawson flipped to another page on his clipboard. Minimum requirements include adequate nutrition for all animals, proper veterinary care, structural repairs to ensure safe containment, and sufficient water supply. He handed her another document. Estimated costs to meet basic standards. Maya stared at the figure at the bottom, $2,500. That's just an estimate, Dawson added. Actual costs will depend on veterinary findings. After he left, Maya sat on the porch steps, the county notice beside her. The official seal seemed to mock her, an emblem of authority she had no power to challenge. 30 days. A ticking clock had just been placed on her inheritance. She was still sitting there when Joe arrived that afternoon, a few bales of hay in his truck bed. One look at her face told him something was wrong. County was here, she said, handing him the notice. Joe read it carefully, his expression darkening. Dawson, he muttered. Man's been trying to shut this place down for years. You know him? He and Frank had history. Frank reported him once for mishandling a seizure case. Joe sighed. Been carrying that grudge ever since. Maya picked up the cost estimate. I don't have this kind of money. I don't even have enough for next week's feed. There might be ways, Joe said slowly. If we get creative. They spent the evening brainstorming options. Selling some livestock was the obvious solution, but the healthiest, most valuable animals were the mustangs, legally complicated to sell. The others were too old, too sick, or otherwise unattractive to buyers. Could sell the land, Joe suggested reluctantly. Developers been sniffing around for years, wants to build vacation homes. The thought of bulldozers leveling the ranch made Maya's stomach twist. And what happens to the animals? Joe didn't answer. He didn't need to. As darkness fell, Maya walked the property alone. In just 5 days, the ranch had begun to feel like home, in a way nowhere else ever had. The animals recognized her now, some even greeting her with apparent affection. The thought of failing them, of men like Dawson loading them into trailers bound for auctions or worse, was unbearable. When she returned to the house, she found an envelope had been slipped under the door. Inside was a newspaper clipping from the local paper. The headline read, Apache Girl Inherits Animal. Nightmare. The brief article quoted local sources describing the ranch as a disaster and questioned whether an inexperienced teenager could possibly handle the situation. At the bottom, someone had scrawled a message in red pen. Some people don't belong here. Take the hint. Maya's hands trembled as she folded the clipping. The ultimatum from the county was bad enough. But this suggested something more, that not everyone in the community wanted her to succeed. She pinned the notice to the kitchen bulletin board as a daily reminder of the deadline. 30 days to perform a miracle. 30 days to save 200 lives. 30 days to prove wrong everyone who thought she didn't belong. Sleep eluded her that night. Instead, She sat at the kitchen table with her great-uncle's journal, searching for anything that might help, any hidden resource, any strategy she hadn't considered. In the quiet hours before dawn, Maya reached a decision. She couldn't do this alone. Tomorrow, she would need to seek help beyond Joe, to reach out to a community she barely knew, to ask for assistance from strangers. The thought terrified her, but the alternative was surrender, and surrender wasn't in her blood. "I know a vet who might come out," Joe said hesitantly. "Might give a discount for the situation." The hope that flared in Maya died quickly when she called the veterinarian from her great-uncle's landline. The woman was sympathetic but firm. "I remember Frank," she said. "Good man with a big heart but no business sense. His account is already past due $3,000. I can't extend more credit." Maya hung up, despair creeping back. "She won't come without payment up front." Joe nodded, as if he'd expected this. "Let's focus on what we can do ourselves then. Start with that horse, Spirit. His leg needs cleaning." What followed was a crash course in basic animal medicine. Joe demonstrated how to approach the injured horse, how to clean the wound, how to apply antibiotic ointment. Spirit tolerated the treatment, though his eyes remained wary. "He trusts you," Maya observed. "Nope," Joe contradicted. "He's tolerating me." "There's a difference. Frank was the only one he trusted. By late afternoon, they'd treated the most pressing cases using supplies from the shed and instructions from the manual. Maya's hands smelled of antiseptic and animal, a combination she found strangely satisfying. As Joe prepared to leave, he hesitated by his truck. "There's something else you should know." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "Property taxes are due next month." Frank was already behind. Maya stared at the notice. The amount would have consumed her entire savings, if she'd had any. "And feed," Joe continued. "What I brought won't last long. 200 animals eat a lot. How much?" Maya asked, dreading the answer. Joe did some quick calculations. "Bare minimum? About $2,000 a month. Assuming you do all labor yourself and nothing gets sick." The number struck Maya like a physical blow. $2,000. Monthly, she had exactly $43 to her name. "I'll help where I can," Joe assured her, seeing her expression. "But I'm on fixed income myself." After he left, Maya sat on the porch, the veterinary manual open in her lap, trying to absorb the fundamentals of animal health assessment. The book's previous owner had filled the margins with observations, corrections, and additions. A secondary education written in faded blue ink. In the chapter on horses, she found a detailed note about Spirit, his rescue from an abusive situation, his medical history, his preference for apples over carrots. The handwriting revealed something of her great-uncle, methodical, observant, patient. A sudden commotion from the chicken coop interrupted her studies. Maya found a hawk attempting to breach the wire covering. She chased it away, then discovered a section of fencing that needed immediate repair. By sunset, Maya had mended the chicken enclosure, cleaned 3 more wounds, refilled water troughs that had mysteriously emptied, and memorized the signs of colic in horses and bloat in cattle, 2 conditions the manual marked as potentially fatal, requiring immediate action. As darkness fell, she collapsed onto the porch steps, muscles trembling with exhaustion. The veterinary manual lay beside her, dozens of pages marked for urgent review. In the distance, the silhouettes of animals shifted against the darkening sky. 200 lives, 200 responsibilities, $2,000 a month. Maya tilted her head back and looked at the stars emerging above the ranch. They seemed both comforting and mocking in their permanence. The land had seen countless struggles like hers come and go. What made her think she could succeed where even her experienced great-uncle had failed? Yet giving up meant surrendering 200 lives to uncertain fates. The thought was unbearable. With aching hands, Maya picked up the manual again and turned to the next chapter by the light of her phone. Tomorrow would come soon enough, with its demands and crises. Tonight, at least, she could arm herself with knowledge. Maya was mucking out stalls in the main barn when she heard the vehicle approach. Not Joe's familiar rattling truck, but something newer, engine humming with authority. She set down her pitchfork and stepped outside, shielding her eyes against the morning sun. A white county SUV with official markings parked next to her pickup. A heavy-set man in a khaki uniform emerged, clipboard in hand. His expression soured as he surveyed the property. "Ms. Yazzie?" he asked, consulting his clipboard. "Yes," Maya confirmed, conscious of her dirty clothes and the manure on her boots. "Carl Dawson, County Animal Control." He didn't offer his hand. "We've received reports of neglected livestock at this address." Maya's heart sank. "Reports? From who?" "That's confidential." His gaze swept past her to the visible animals. "I'm here to conduct an inspection." For the next hour, Maya followed Dawson as he methodically documented conditions throughout the ranch. He noted the underweight animals, inadequate fencing, insufficient shelter, and limited water sources with grim efficiency. His camera clicked constantly, recording evidence of what he termed substandard care. "Some of these animals need immediate veterinary attention," he stated, pointing to Spirit's infected leg and a sheep with visible respiratory distress. "I know," Maya said, "and I'm treating them myself." "I called the vet, but home remedies aren't adequate," Dawson interrupted. "These animals require professional care." Back at his vehicle, Dawson produced an official-looking document from his clipboard. "I'm issuing a notice of violation under County Code 12.4 regarding animal welfare standards." The paper trembled slightly in Maya's hands as she read. The language was dense with legal terminology, but the message was clear. She had 30 days to bring the ranch into compliance or face seizure of the animals and criminal charges for neglect. 30 days, Maya's voice cracked. "That's impossible. I just inherited this place. Not my problem." Dawson's face remained impassive. "The previous owner's death doesn't exempt the property from regulations. What exactly am I supposed to do?" Maya asked, desperation creeping into her tone. Dawson flipped to another page on his clipboard. "Minimum requirements include adequate nutrition for all animals, proper veterinary care, structural repairs to ensure safe containment, and sufficient water supply." He handed her another document. "Estimated costs to meet basic standards." Maya stared at the figure at the bottom, $12,500. "That's just an estimate," Dawson added. "Actual costs will depend on veterinary findings." After he left, Maya sat on the porch steps, the county notice beside her. The official seal seemed to mock her, an emblem of authority she had no power to challenge. 30 days, a ticking clock, had just been placed on her inheritance. She was still sitting there when Joe arrived that afternoon, a few bales of hay in his truck bed. One look at her face told him something was wrong. "County was here," she said, handing him the notice. Joe read it carefully, his expression darkening. "Dawson," he muttered. "Man's been trying to shut this place down for years. You know him." He and Frank had history. Frank reported him once for mishandling a seizure case. Joe sighed. "Been carrying that grudge ever since." Maya picked up the cost estimate. "I don't have this kind of money. I don't even have enough for next week's feed." "There might be ways," Joe said slowly. "If we get creative." They spent the evening brainstorming options. Selling some livestock was the obvious solution, but the healthiest, most valuable animals were the Mustangs, legally complicated to sell. The others were too old, too sick, or otherwise unattractive to buyers. "Could sell the land," Joe suggested reluctantly. "Developers been sniffing around for years. Wants to build vacation homes." The thought of bulldozers leveling the ranch made Maya's stomach twist. "And what happens to the animals?" Joe didn't answer. He didn't need to. As darkness fell, Maya walked the property alone. In just 5 days, the ranch had begun to feel like home in a way nowhere else ever had. The animals recognized her now, some even greeting her with apparent affection. The thought of failing them, of men like Dawson loading them into trailers bound for auctions or worse, was unbearable. When she returned to the house, she found an envelope had been slipped under the door. Inside was a newspaper clipping from the local paper. The headline read, "Apache Girl Inherits Animal. Nightmare." The brief article quoted local sources describing the ranch as a disaster. and questioned whether an inexperienced teenager could possibly handle the situation. At the bottom, someone had scrawled a message in red pen. "Some people don't belong here. Take the hint." Maya's hands trembled as she folded the clipping. The ultimatum from the county was bad enough, but this suggested something more. That not everyone in the community wanted her to succeed. She pinned the notice to the kitchen bulletin board as a daily reminder of the deadline. 30 days to perform a miracle. 30 days to save 200 lives. 30 days to prove wrong everyone who thought she didn't belong. Sleep eluded her that night. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table with her great-uncle's journal, searching for anything that might help, any hidden resource, any strategy she hadn't considered. In the quiet hours before dawn, Maya reached a decision. She couldn't do this alone. Tomorrow, she would need to seek help beyond Joe, to reach out to a community she barely knew, to ask for assistance from strangers. The thought terrified her, but the alternative was surrender, and surrender wasn't in her blood. From his truck, Hendricks brought a toolbox and a large paper bag. "Thought you could use these. Some specialized tools Frank loaned me years back. And," he handed her the bag, "some medications for that stallion Elena mentioned. My brother's a vet in Phoenix." The toolbox contained equipment Maya had never seen, specialized implements for animal care, handmade devices whose purposes she couldn't guess. Hendricks spent an hour explaining each one, demonstrating how Frank had created labor-saving tools for specific ranch tasks. "Your uncle," Hendricks said as he prepared to leave, "was the stubbornest man I ever met, but also the smartest. He figured out ways to do the work of 3 men by himself." The next morning, Maya injected Spirit with the antibiotics, following Elena's instructions precisely. The horse watched her with those intelligent eyes that seemed to evaluate her worthiness. When she finished, he lowered his head and gently nudged her shoulder, the first voluntary contact he had initiated. Maya spent that day implementing her great-uncle's systems, using his specialized tools. A feeding chute he'd designed cut the time needed for the cattle by half. Her pulley system made moving hay bales possible without Tyler's help. A series of connected pipes delivered water to distant troughs without carrying buckets. By sunset, Maya had completed her daily tasks with time to spare, a first since inheriting the ranch. She sat on the porch, reviewing her property map with satisfaction. Already, some red stars had been erased as animals recovered. More efficient systems were marked with green arrows. The county deadline still loomed. But the panic that had initially accompanied it had transmuted into something else. Determination, yes, but also growing confidence. She was learning, adapting, solving problems. Her great-uncle had managed this ranch alone for years. With each passing day, Maya better understood how and why. That night she added a new element to her map, a legend explaining the symbols, color codes, and notations. At the top she wrote a title, Whispering Pines Animal Sanctuary, not ranch, sanctuary. The words felt right. This wasn't just property she had inherited. It was a mission, a purpose. And somehow, despite all logic suggesting otherwise, Maya was beginning to believe she might actually succeed. The first warning was subtle, a slight decrease in water pressure when Maya filled the troughs. She might have dismissed it as normal fluctuation if not for the uneasy look on Joe's face. "Well, pump's not sounding right," he said, listening to the mechanical groaning from the pump house. "Been making that noise long?" Maya shook her head. "Just noticed it yesterday." Joe removed the access panel and peered inside at the aging machinery. His expression grew grimmer as he inspected various components. "Main bearings going out," he finally declared. "Pumps from the 70s. Parts will be hard to find if they exist at all. Can it be fixed?" Maya asked, already dreading the answer. "Maybe patched temporarily." "Needs replacing, really." Joe wiped his hands on a rag. "I'll see what I can do." They limped through 2 more days with Joe's temporary repairs, the pump's protests growing louder, the water pressure steadily declining. Maya implemented water conservation measures, minimizing cleaning operations, focusing only on drinking water for the animals. On the third day, the pump died with a shuddering groan that echoed across the property. The timing couldn't have been worse. June heat had descended on the ranch, with temperatures climbing into the high 90s. 200 animals needed water daily, thousands of gallons that now had no source. Elena arrived to find Maya in near panic. "Without water, we'll lose animals within days," Maya said. "The county deadline is less than 2 weeks away, and if animals start dying..." Elena made phone calls while Maya and Joe assessed options. The nearest neighbor with a working well was 3 miles away. The creek that crossed the property's edge was nearly dry this time of year. The town water supply didn't extend to the outlying ranches. "We need a water truck," Joe said finally. "And a new pump. Fast." The estimate from the well company arrived that afternoon. $4,200 for a replacement pump, plus installation. Maya stared at the figure, her stomach sinking. The sanctuary's donation jar contained just over $300, nowhere near enough. What about a payment plan? She asked the company representative. "Company policy is payment up front for new customers," the man replied. "Your great-uncle's account has too many late payments in its history." When he left, Maya sat heavily on the porch steps. The temperature had reached 97 degrees. Already, the animals were showing signs of distress from reduced water. Tyler arrived with 2 friends and their pickup trucks. "We'll haul water from my parents' place," he announced. "Not a permanent solution, but it'll keep the animals alive today." The water brigade continued into the evening, truck after truck arriving with containers. A human chain, passing buckets to fill troughs with the precious liquid. Community members Maya had never met showed up to help, having heard about the crisis through Elena's network. But hauling water for 200 animals was an impossible task to sustain. By nightfall, Maya knew they had merely postponed the inevitable. Without a functioning well pump, the sanctuary couldn't operate. In her great-uncle's bedroom, Maya opened the small jewelry box she'd found in his dresser. Inside lay a silver and turquoise necklace, wrapped in a note explaining it had belonged to her grandmother. It was beautiful, and the only item of value Maya possessed. The next morning she drove to the town pawnshop. The owner examined the necklace carefully. "Museum-quality work," he said appreciatively. "Old stone's traditional setting. I can give you $200. It wasn't enough for the pump, but it was a start. Maya accepted the offer with a heaviness in her heart, watching as the last physical connection to her grandmother disappeared into the shop's safe. Back at the ranch, the water brigade had resumed. Maya found Joe examining the dead pump, tools spread around him. "Might be able to rebuild it," he muttered, though his tone lacked conviction. "Need parts, though." Maya showed him the cash from the pawn shop. "It's a start. Maybe the well company will take partial payment." Joe's eyes softened with understanding when she explained the necklace's significance. "Your grandmother would approve," he said quietly. Saving lives matters more than keepsakes. The well company remained firm on their payment policy, but Elena found a retired maintenance worker who believed he could rebuild the pump for the parts cost alone. With the pawnshop money, they ordered the critical components. As the days of water hauling continued, the physical toll mounted. Maya worked from dawn past dusk, her body moving mechanically through exhaustion. On the 4th day of the crisis, in the punishing afternoon heat, the world suddenly tilted sideways. She was vaguely aware of falling, of voices calling her name. Then nothing. She awoke on the living room couch, Elena checking her pulse. Joe and Tyler hovering nearby with worried expressions. "Heat exhaustion," Elena diagnosed. "Possibly bordering on heat stroke. You're done for today." Maya tried to protest, but her body betrayed her, refusing to cooperate. Elena forced water and electrolytes, while Joe and Tyler promised to handle the evening duties. As twilight fell, Maya drifted in and out of consciousness on the couch. Through the open window, she heard Joe and Elena talking on the porch. Their voices carrying in the evening air. "Girl's killing herself for these animals," Joe said. "Just like her uncle," Elena replied. "Same determination, same blind spot about personal limits. difference is Frank had decades of experience. She's got days, Joe's voice lowered. County inspector's coming next week. We both know they're not going to meet those requirements in time. What happens to the animals then? Elena asked. Same thing that always happens. Auction for the ones with value. Euthanasia for the rest. Joe sighed heavily. You hate to see it, but maybe it's inevitable. Girls fighting a losing battle. Maya closed her eyes, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She had given everything, her time, her strength, even her grandmother's necklace. Yet the sanctuary remained on the precipice of failure, the animals still at risk. For the first time since inheriting Whispering Pines, Maya allowed herself to consider surrender. Perhaps Joe was right. Perhaps this had always been an impossible task. Perhaps her determination alone couldn't overcome the realities of 200 animals, a broken infrastructure, and insufficient resources. The knowledge settled over her like a physical weight. Failure wasn't just a possibility, it was the most likely outcome. And when it came, 200 lives would pay the price for her inadequacy. Morning arrived with the sound of trucks. Maya struggled to sit up, her body still weak from yesterday's collapse. Through the window, she saw 3 vehicles she didn't recognize pulling into the ranch yard. Joe entered without knocking. You've got visitors. Tyler's father and some men from his construction crew. Maya managed to dress and make her way outside, where Mr. Williams, a broad-shouldered man with his son's features set in a weathered face, waited with 4 other men. Tyler told us about the pump, he said without preamble. We brought a generator and submersible pump. Temporary fix, but it'll buy time. Within hours, they had rigged a system that bypassed the broken pump, drawing water from deep in the well. The jury-rigged solution wouldn't last forever, but it would provide water while they worked on a permanent replacement. My boy believes in what you're doing here, Mr. Williams said, as they watched water flow into the main storage tank for the first time in days. Says it reminds him there's still good in the world. The water crisis temporarily resolved, Maya turned her attention back to the looming county inspection. Though physically improved after a full night's rest, doubt still clouded her thinking. Joe's words echoed in her mind. Girls fighting a losing battle. That afternoon, she found herself drawn to a small shed behind the house that she hadn't fully explored. Inside, dust-covered tarps concealed shapes of varying sizes. Curious, Maya pulled back the nearest covering. Beneath lay a workbench unlike any she'd seen before, customized with specialized clamps, measuring devices, and tool mounts. The drawers contained an astonishing array of implements, some familiar, others mysterious in purpose. One wall held pegboards with outlines showing where each tool belonged. All meticulously organized, Maya uncovered more treasures, handcrafted equipment for animal care, feeding systems designed for efficiency, medical devices modified for specific needs. Each piece spoke of ingenuity, of problems solved through creativity rather than money. This had been her great-uncle's workshop, his innovation lab. Here, he had created solutions when conventional approaches were financially out of reach. A large metal toolbox sat beneath the bench, locked with a simple padlock. The key from her great-uncle's keyring fit perfectly. Inside, Maya found notebooks filled with designs, instructions, and ideas, some implemented, others merely conceptual. Diagrams showed water recycling systems for animal troughs, solar heating for barns, automated feeding mechanisms operated by animal movement. One notebook contained something unexpected, a complete business plan for transforming Whispering Pines into a self-supporting sanctuary. Her great-uncle had envisioned educational programs, volunteer opportunities, even products that could be sold to sustain operations. Maya spent hours in that shed, poring over her great-uncle's vision, understanding for the first time that he hadn't been merely reactive in his animal rescues. He had been working towards something larger, a sanctuary that could sustain itself while fulfilling its mission. When Elena arrived for evening treatments, she found Maya with renewed energy, implementing one of Frank's designs, a modified feeding system that reduced waste by nearly 50%. You seem different, Eleanor observed. I found Uncle Frank's workshop, Maya explained. He had solutions for everything, designs, plans, innovations. He wasn't just keeping these animals alive day to day. He was building something sustainable. Together, they explored the workshop, Elena recognizing many of the tools and explaining their purposes. Frank was an engineer before he became a rancher, she confirmed, always thinking about better ways to do things. The following days saw a transformation at Whispering Pines. Maya, armed with her great-uncle's designs, implemented system after system that he had developed. Rainwater collection reduced dependence on the well. Modified feeders cut waste and labor time. Specialized grooming tools allowed Maya to treat multiple animals efficiently. Word spread about the innovative approaches being used at the sanctuary. A local high school science teacher brought students to see the systems in action. A reporter from a regional agriculture publication arrived to do a feature. Most significantly, Elena identified several animals among the sanctuary's population that were rare heritage breeds, livestock with genetic lines worth preserving. A cattle breeder offered to pay for breeding rights to one of the older bulls, providing unexpected income. Even Dawson, the county inspector, seemed impressed during his preliminary visit, though he remained non-committal about whether the improvements would satisfy regulations. "You've made progress," he acknowledged, reviewing his checklist. "Still have concerns about some of the medical cases and the structural integrity of the North Barn." Maya nodded, taking his criticism seriously rather than defensively. "We'll address those before your final inspection." When Dawson left, Joe shook his head in amazement. "First time I've seen that man leave here without looking like he swallowed a lemon. Frank would be proud." That evening, Maya sat on the porch with her great-uncle's toolbox open beside her, examining a particularly clever device he had designed for administering medication to reluctant animals. The sunset painted the sanctuary in golden light, illuminating healthy animals grazing in repaired enclosures, water flowing from functioning systems, and signs of renewal everywhere. In just a few weeks, she had gone from overwhelmed heir to sanctuary director with growing confidence. The county deadline still loomed, but it no longer seemed insurmountable. Frank Yazzie hadn't just left her a ranch and 200 animals. He had left her a blueprint for success, if only she had the wisdom to find it and the courage to implement it. Maya closed the toolbox, running her fingers over her great-uncle's initials carved into the lid. "Thank you," she whispered to the man she'd never met but was coming to know through his legacy. "I understand now." Maya sat at the kitchen table, a fresh notebook open before her. The county inspection was just days away, and while the physical improvements to the sanctuary were substantial, the financial picture remained precarious. Donations had helped with immediate needs, but sustainability required more than goodwill. Elena entered with a bag of groceries, another quiet contribution she'd been making since getting involved. "What are you working on?" she asked, noticing Maya's intense concentration. "Trying to figure out the money," Maya admitted. "Even if we pass inspection, we can't rely on donations forever." Elena joined her at the table. "Your great-uncle struggled with this too." His heart was bigger than his wallet. Together, they reviewed the sanctuary's assets through new eyes, not just liabilities requiring feed and care, but potential resources. Maya's notebook pages filled with possibilities, drawn from her uncle's plans and their own brainstorming. The heritage breed cattle could provide breeding stock. The sheep produced wool that could be sold to local artisans. The free-range chickens laid eggs superior to commercial offerings. Even the goats offered multiple income streams through milk, cheese, and brush clearing services for fire prevention. "We could offer educational programs," Elena suggested. "School field trips, workshops on sustainable ranching, animal care classes." Maya nodded, adding it to her growing list. "And volunteer opportunities for people who want hands-on experience." By evening, Maya had drafted the outline of a business model that could potentially sustain Whispering Pines. It wasn't just a collection of rescue animals, it was a living classroom. a genetic preserve for heritage breeds, and a community resource. The next morning, Maya drove to the tribal community center and requested a meeting with Margaret Sosi. The elder woman listened as Maya presented her vision for the sanctuary's future, occasionally nodding but otherwise unreadable. Our people have always understood the connection between animals, land, and community, Maya concluded. I want Whispering Pines to honor that tradition while creating something sustainable. Margaret studied her for a long moment. Your great-uncle came to me with similar ideas years ago. I wonder if you've found his notes. I have, Maya confirmed. I'm building on his foundation. Margaret nodded, seeming satisfied. The tribal council might consider partnership opportunities. Educational programs for our youth, cultural workshops, maybe even tourism opportunities that respect our traditions. Maya left with a promise of a formal presentation to the council and something more valuable. Margaret's personal endorsement of the sanctuary's mission. Back at Whispering Pines, Maya found Tyler and his friends constructing a viewing platform overlooking the Mustang pasture. When questioned, Tyler shrugged self-consciously. Thought visitors might like seeing them without disturbing them, he explained. Dad says if you're going to have educational programs, you need infrastructure. The simple structure represented something profound. Others were beginning to invest in her vision, to see beyond the current crisis to what Whispering Pines could become. That afternoon, Maya received an unexpected call from the local school principal, inquiring about possible field trips. The newspaper article had sparked interest, and teachers were looking for hands-on learning opportunities for students. We could pay a modest fee per student, the principal suggested. Nothing extravagant, but it would help offset your costs. By sunset, Maya had booked 3 class visits for the following month, contingent on passing the county inspection. Potential income, $450. Small, but a start. Elena arrived with additional news. She had contacted colleagues at the State University's veterinary program. They're interested in sending students for practical experience, she reported. They would provide basic care under supervision, and you'd get free labor and expertise. Maya added this to her notebook, calculating the value of professional veterinary services they normally couldn't afford. The potential savings were substantial. That night, as she reviewed her growing business plan, Maya realized how dramatically her perspective had shifted. Where once she saw only overwhelming responsibility, she now recognized opportunity. The sanctuary wasn't just consuming resources, it could generate them through the right partnerships and programs. She created spreadsheets projecting income and expenses, conservative estimates of growth, and prioritized investments. If the heritage cattle breeding program succeeded, if the educational workshops attracted sufficient interest, if the community partnerships developed, the numbers suggested Whispering Pines could become self-sustaining within 18 months. Joe reviewed her projections with the skepticism of experience. Ambitious, he commented. Lots of ifs in there. But possible, Maya insisted. The foundations are all here. Uncle Frank saw it years ago. We just need to execute the vision. Even as she developed the business model, physical improvements continued. Tyler's father brought lumber reclaimed from a demolished barn, allowing repairs to structures that would have been unaffordable otherwise. A retired plumber fixed critical issues in the water distribution system. The local feed store owner offered damaged bags at steep discounts. The day before the county inspection, Maya surveyed the transformation with pride. Fences stood repaired, animals showed improving health, and systems functioned with increasing efficiency. It wasn't perfect. Years of deferred maintenance couldn't be reversed in weeks, but the progress was undeniable. That evening, she sat on the porch updating her notebook with the day's developments. What had begun as scattered notes had evolved into a comprehensive business plan, part inspiration from her great-uncle, part her own innovation, part community input. The pages contained not just survival strategies, but a vision for the future. Elena joined her, reviewing the latest additions with approval. You know, when you first inherited this place, I gave you a month before you'd give up. Most would have. Maya smiled. I considered it. Several times. What kept you going? Maya thought about the question. The easy answer was the animals, their needs, their trust, their dependence. But the truth was more complex. This place, she said finally, it's not just land and animals. It's purpose. Its connection, she gestured toward her notebook. Its potential to be something meaningful. Elena nodded, understanding. That's what Frank saw too. Not just abandoned animals that needed saving, but a way to preserve something important about our relationship with the natural world. As darkness fell, Maya added one final note to her business plan, a mission statement for Whispering Pines Animal Sanctuary, to honor the bond between humans, animals, and land through education, preservation, and compassionate care. Tomorrow would bring the county inspection and its verdict. But regardless of the outcome, Maya had found something her years in foster care had never provided, a sense of belonging, of purpose, of home. The county inspection went better than Maya dared hope. Dawson remained professionally detached, but his clipboard noted more check marks than violations. The animals' improved condition, repaired fencing, and functioning water system addressed his primary concerns. You've made substantial progress, he acknowledged grudgingly. I'll need to review everything back at the office before making a final determination. It wasn't approval, but it wasn't rejection either. Maya allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism as his county vehicle disappeared down the driveway. That optimism faded quickly the following morning when a gleaming black pickup truck arrived, kicking up dust as it came to an abrupt stop beside the house. The driver emerged unhurriedly, a tall man in his 50s, wearing expensive boots and a crisp white shirt despite the heat. You must be Frank's heir, he said, extending his hand. James Blackwood. I own Rocking Bee Ranch on your northern border. Maya recognized the name. Joe had mentioned Blackwood as one of the largest landowners in the county. With political connections to match his wealth, what can I do for you, Mr. Blackwood? She asked, noting his appraising gaze as it swept over the property. Just being neighborly, he replied with practiced smoothness. Wanted to introduce myself and discuss a small matter. The small matter turned out to be a property line dispute. Blackwood produced a survey claiming the boundary between their properties ran 30 feet south of where the existing fence stood, cutting directly through one of the Mustang pastures. That fence has been there for decades, Maya said, studying the survey with suspicion. Incorrectly placed, Blackwood countered. I've been generous about it with your great-uncle, but with new ownership, it's time to set things right. Before Maya could respond, he added, I've noticed some of your animals straying onto my land. Fence must be compromised somewhere. All our fences are intact now, Maya stated firmly. If you've seen strays, it must have been before the repairs. Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. Just yesterday, actually. County takes trespassing livestock seriously. Health concerns, property damage. The implication was clear. He could file a complaint that would jeopardize her standing with animal control just when things were improving. After he left, Maya walked the northern fence line with Joe, finding it fully intact with no signs of animal crossings. He's lying, Joe said bluntly. Man's been trying to get pieces of this land for years. Frank wouldn't sell. Why would he want it? His ranch is huge already. Joe pointed to the northeastern corner of the property. Water rights. There's an aquifer access point on this section, valuable in drought years. 3 days later, Maya found a county surveyor marking the disputed boundary, authorized by a permit she'd never been notified about. The new line placed nearly 2 acres of whispering pines, including critical water access, onto Blackwood's property. At the center of the dispute stood an old boundary marker, a cement post placed decades earlier, now weathered and partially hidden by brush. According to Blackwood's survey, this marker was incorrectly positioned. According to Frank's property documents, it was exactly where it should be. The issue escalated when several sheep escaped through a mysteriously cut section of fence, exactly where it bordered Blackwood's land. Maya discovered the breach during morning rounds and quickly recovered the animals. but not before Blackwood had photographed them on his property and filed a formal complaint with the county. "This is deliberate," Elena said when Maya recounted the incidents. "He's trying to discredit you before your probationary period ends." Maya confronted Blackwood at his ranch office, a timber-framed building that made her great-uncle's house look like a shack. "I know what you're doing," she said without preamble. The fence was cut intentionally. Blackwood leaned back in his leather chair, unruffled. "Serious accusation without proof. Coyotes damage fencing all the time. With wire cutters?" Maya challenged. He shrugged. "Look, I understand your situation. Young girl, no ranching experience, overwhelming responsibility. There's an easier solution." From his desk, he retrieved a document, a purchase offer for Whispering Pines. The figure made Maya blink. "It was substantially above market value. I'd find homes for the animals," he added. "The healthier ones, anyway." The implication about the others hung in the air unspoken. "I'm not selling," Maya stated firmly. "You should reconsider. Ranching is a hard business. Accidents happen." The veiled threat lingered as Maya left, her hands shaking with anger. Back at the sanctuary, she found Tyler and his father reinforcing the cut fence section. "Word about Blackwood gets around fast," Mr. Williams explained. "Figured you could use some help." The boundary dispute took an unexpected turn when Maya discovered her great-uncle's original property deed in a lockbox beneath the floorboards in his bedroom. Attached was a survey from 1963, clearly marking the boundary where the old cement post stood. More importantly, it contained official county stamps and signatures that predated Blackwood's claim. The discovery should have resolved the issue, but Blackwood had connections. The county recorder's office reported inconsistencies in the documentation, requiring further review. The process could take months. Meanwhile, the harassment continued. Water troughs on the disputed land were found contaminated. A gate was left open, allowing several goats to escape. Equipment disappeared from unlocked sheds. Maya documented everything meticulously, installing the trail cameras Eleanor loaned her. But nothing captured clear evidence of tampering. The situation came to a head when Blackwood arrived unannounced with a county commissioner and Dawson from Animal Control. They inspected the disputed boundary, while Maya watched helplessly, the three men speaking in low tones, occasionally glancing her way. Before leaving, Blackwood approached with renewed confidence. "Final offer," he said, handing her an updated purchase agreement with an even higher figure. "Consider it carefully." "The commissioner agrees. The survey evidence supports my claim." Maya stood by the old boundary marker long after they departed, her hand resting on the weathered concrete. This simple post, erected decades before her birth, now represented something far more significant than a property line. It marked the boundary between intimidation and principle, between surrender and determination. That evening Joe found her there, still contemplating the marker and all it represented. "Blackwood doesn't just want the land," he said. "He wants to develop it. Luxury homes overlooking the valley. Been his plan for years. What happens to the animals in that plan?" Maya asked. Joe's silence was answer enough. The morning dawned with unusual activity, 3 county vehicles arriving unannounced, Dawson leading a team of officials with clipboards and cameras. Maya watched from the porch, her stomach knotting with apprehension. "Surprise inspection," Dawson announced with barely concealed satisfaction. Based on new complaints about animal welfare, Maya followed as they methodically documented conditions, noting their focus on areas that had shown the most improvement. Their questions seemed designed to find fault rather than assess progress. "These sheep appear underweight," one inspector commented. "Examining animals Elena had recently declared healthy. And this water is cloudy," another added. Testing a trough Maya had cleaned that morning, the most damning moment came when they reached the Mustang enclosure. An inspector produced a plastic bag containing what appeared to be moldy feed. "Found this in the feeding area," he stated, photographing the evidence. "Contaminated feed can cause serious illness." "That's impossible," Maya protested. "I checked everything this morning. Her denial fell on deaf ears as the team continued their inspection, finding more evidence of neglect, evidence that hadn't existed hours earlier. As they prepared to leave, Dawson handed Maya an official document. Based on today's findings, we're issuing an order for immediate corrective action. You have 48 hours to address these issues before we consider animal seizure. The allegations were severe: contaminated feed, inadequate water quality, insufficient medical care, and failure to maintain proper nutrition. The document included photographs taken during the inspection, damning evidence that contradicted everything Maya knew to be true. When she called Elena in panic, the veterinarian arrived within the hour, examining the cited evidence with growing anger. "This is fabricated," she declared, testing water samples from the supposedly contaminated trough. "Someone planted that moldy feed. And these sheep aren't underweight. They're appropriately conditioned for their age and breed." Maya's mind raced. "Blackwood? It has to be." "Not personally," Elena reasoned. "He wouldn't risk being caught. But he could have influenced the inspection, maybe even had someone plant evidence." The next morning brought an unexpected visitor, Lisa, a college student who had been volunteering at the sanctuary for the past 2 weeks. Maya had been grateful for the extra hands, especially since Lisa seemed particularly interested in the sanctuary's operations, often asking detailed questions about schedules and practices. "I heard about the inspection," Lisa said, concern in her voice. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Something about her tone struck Maya as off, too rehearsed, too perfect. On impulse, she mentioned the Mustangs. "It's strange they found contaminated feed there." "That's your area. Didn't you check it yesterday?" Lisa's hesitation was barely perceptible. "Of course. Everything was fine." Later that day, Maya noticed Lisa's car parked at Blackwood's ranch as she drove past on her way to town. A cold realization settled in her stomach. The questions about routines, the interest in the sanctuary's operations, the access to all areas of the property. Lisa wasn't just a helpful volunteer. Maya confronted her that evening as she arrived for her shift. "I saw your car at Blackwood's today." Lisa's composure faltered momentarily before her expression hardened. "He's my uncle. I was visiting family and reporting on our operations." Maya pressed, telling him when to schedule inspections. "Planting evidence?" "You don't understand," Lisa replied, dropping all pretense. "Uncle James is trying to save these animals from someone who doesn't know what she's doing. A teenager playing rancher while animals suffer. Is that what he told you? While he was planning luxury developments for this land?" Confusion flickered across Lisa's face. "What are you talking about?" "He's going to expand his wildlife preserve. Create a proper sanctuary with professional staff." Maya realized with a jolt that Lisa believed she was helping the animals. "He lied to you." "Ask him about his development plans. Ask him why he's been trying to buy this land for years, long before I inherited it." Before Lisa could respond, Elena arrived carrying a folder of documents. Her expression darkened seeing Lisa. "I've been reviewing the inspection report," Elena said, ignoring the younger woman. "The photographs of underweight animals don't match our actual livestock. They've been digitally altered." She produced side-by-side comparisons, the inspection photos showing animals with exaggerated ribs and hip bones, compared to Elena's documentation of the same animals taken days earlier. "Someone created a falsified report," Elena concluded. "With doctored evidence." Lisa's face paled as she looked at the manipulated images. Without another word, she hurried to her car and drove away. The next morning, Tyler arrived with unexpected news. "My dad knows someone in the county recorder's office. Blackwood submitted development plans 3 years ago for Whispering Pines Estates, luxury homes where the sanctuary stands." Maya called Michael Redfeather, a tribal attorney who had offered assistance with the boundary dispute. After reviewing the falsified inspection report, he agreed to represent the sanctuary pro bono. "This crosses the line from civil to criminal," he noted. "Falsifying official documents, tampering with evidence. If we can prove it." Proof arrived from an unexpected source that afternoon. Lisa, her expression stricken as she handed Maya a USB drive. You were right, she admitted. I found the development plans in his office. And this, she indicated the drive, is the original inspection report before it was altered. I was supposed to delete it after the changes were made. But I kept a copy. The documents revealed the extent of the deception. Dawson and Blackwood had collaborated to create a case for animal seizure, manipulating evidence and exploiting Lisa's genuine concern for the animal's welfare. I'm so sorry, Lisa whispered. I thought I was helping them. The falsified animal health report became the centerpiece of Michael's legal strategy. Within hours, he had filed emergency motions to block any seizure action and initiated complaints against both Dawson and Blackwood for official misconduct. By evening, the county administrator had called, apologetic and concerned about potential liability. The seizure order was suspended pending investigation. An independent veterinarian would conduct a new inspection as Maya pinned the falsified report to her bulletin board. A reminder of how close she'd come to losing everything. She felt oddly grateful for the experience. It had clarified something important. This wasn't just about saving animals anymore. It was about standing against those who would exploit vulnerability for profit, who would manipulate truth to serve their interests. The sanctuary wasn't just a refuge for animals. It was becoming a symbol of resistance against the Blackwoods of the world, who saw land only for its development potential, animals only for their commercial value, and people only as obstacles to be removed or manipulated. Maya hadn't asked for this fight, but she now understood it had always been inevitable. Her great-uncle had fought it for years. Now it was her turn to continue the battle he had begun. Maya stood before the gathered volunteers in the main barn, their faces illuminated by early morning light filtering through the rafters. The group had grown, from Tyler and his initial friends to over 20 regular helpers of varying ages and backgrounds. Some were students, others retirees. A few were tribal members sent by Margaret. All were now united by the threat facing the sanctuary. Blackwood won't stop with this failed attempt, Maya told them. The investigation will delay him, but he'll try again. We need a strategy. Michael Redfeather, the tribal attorney, stepped forward. This isn't just a legal battle, it's a public one. Blackwood has influence with officials, but he's vulnerable to community pressure. Elena nodded in agreement. We need to make Whispering Pines too visible to dismantle quietly. From this impromptu council of war emerged a multi-pronged approach. Lisa, now committed to exposing her uncle's deception, provided insider information about his tactics and connections. Tyler and his tech-savvy friends established social media accounts documenting the sanctuary's work and the animals' stories. Joe reached out to longtime ranchers who had witnessed Frank's dedication over decades. Maya found herself thrust into an unfamiliar role: spokesperson, leader, strategist. She who had spent years in foster care avoiding attention was now seeking it deliberately, telling the sanctuary's story to anyone who would listen. The tribal council meeting marked a turning point. Maya stood before the elders, her hands steady on a carved wooden walking stick that had once belonged to her great-uncle. Margaret had presented it to her that morning, explaining its significance. Frank carried this when he addressed the council years ago, she said. It belonged to your great-grandfather before him, a leader's staff. Now Maya held it not as a prop, but as a connection to her ancestors, as she presented her vision for Whispering Pines, not just as an animal sanctuary, but as a living classroom for traditional ecological knowledge, a bridge between cultures, a preservation site for heritage breeds, and a training center for sustainable ranching practices. My great-uncle saw something worth protecting here, she concluded. Not just animals, but wisdom about our relationship with the land, with other creatures, with the resources we depend on. That wisdom belongs to all of us, but especially to the Apache people whose connection to this land spans generations. The council's endorsement came with practical support. Tribal youth programs would partner with the sanctuary for educational activities, bringing both participants and funding. More importantly, the tribal government's official backing lent political weight against Blackwood's influence. Michael built on this foundation, filing legal motions, challenging the boundary dispute based on historical surveys and tribal land records that predated current county documentation. The temporary injunction he secured prevented any enforcement of Blackwood's property claims until the case could be fully heard. The media strategy unfolded simultaneously. The local newspaper editor, impressed by the community mobilization, ran a series on the sanctuary's mission and Blackwood's development plans. Regional television stations picked up the story of the young Apache woman fighting to preserve her heritage against powerful interests. Online platforms amplified these narratives, generating supportive comments and offers of assistance from across the state. Perhaps most effective was the education campaign. Tyler's mother, a schoolteacher, organized field trips that brought children to interact with the animals while learning about conservation, responsible land management, and indigenous perspectives on stewardship. Each child returned home with stories and photographs, extending the sanctuary's reach into hundreds of households. Throughout these initiatives, Maya continued the daily work of running the sanctuary, implementing her business plan with growing confidence. The Heritage Breed program secured its first contracts. Educational workshops began generating modest income. Grant applications, prepared with Elena's guidance, showed promising initial feedback. Blackwood's counterattacks came as expected: zoning complaints, allegations of code violations, attempts to turn neighbors against the sanctuary through rumors of disease and noise. Each was methodically addressed and refuted with documentation and testimony. The campaign culminated in a petition demanding full investigation of the falsified inspection report and Blackwood's development plans. Signatures accumulated rapidly, first hundreds, and then thousands, representing a significant portion of the county's population. "He underestimated you," Michael observed as they reviewed the growing support. "And the community's attachment to this place." Maya shook her head. "He underestimated my great-uncle. Everything we're doing builds on his foundation." As the date for the county hearing approached, Maya spent a quiet evening walking the sanctuary grounds, her great-uncle's staff in hand. The walking stick had become more than a symbolic connection to her ancestors. It was a practical tool on uneven terrain and, increasingly, a source of strength during difficult moments. The carved wood bore the marks of years of handling, smooth where hands had gripped it, weathered by sun and rain. Near the top, subtle designs had been etched into the surface, traditional Apache symbols for harmony, balance, and perseverance. Maya traced these patterns with her fingers as she checked on the mustangs, their wild beauty still untamed despite months in sanctuary. The stallion that had caught her attention on her first day acknowledged her presence with a steady gaze, no longer suspicious, but not yet trusting. "We're still here," she told him quietly. "Still fighting." The walking stick had accompanied her great-uncle on his own battles against bureaucracy, financial constraints, and those who couldn't understand his mission. Now it supported Maya as she continued his work, facing her own challenges with growing confidence. Tomorrow would bring the hearing that might determine the sanctuary's future. Maya would stand before county officials, presenting evidence and arguments, defending not just animals, but a vision for how humans might live in better balance with the natural world. She would carry the staff as she spoke, not as a prop or symbol, but as a tangible connection to the generations before her who had faced their own struggles and persevered. The wood seemed to hold their wisdom, their patience, their determination. As darkness fell, Maya returned to the house, pausing on the porch to look out over the sanctuary. No longer a burden she had reluctantly inherited, but a purpose she had wholeheartedly embraced. Whatever tomorrow brought, she would face it not alone, but with the strength of community, the wisdom of elders, and the legacy of those who had walked this path before her. The walking stick stood by the door, ready for tomorrow's battle. The county administration building loomed before Maya, its institutional architecture imposing against the morning sky. Inside, the hearing room was already filling with people, far more than she had expected. Supporters from the sanctuary sat alongside tribal members, local ranchers, and families whose children had visited Whispering Pines. Their presence bolstered her courage as she took her place at the front table beside Michael Redfeather. Across the aisle, Blackwood sat with his attorney, his expression impassive despite the crowd clearly favoring Maya. Dawson was notably absent, placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. Into the falsified report, the five-person county commission entered, led by Chairwoman Helen Garrison, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who had served on the board for over a decade. Her reputation for fairness gave Maya cautious hope. This hearing addresses two matters, Garrison began. The property dispute between Whispering Pines Animal Sanctuary and Rocking Bee Ranch, and allegations of animal welfare violations at said sanctuary. We'll hear evidence on both issues before deliberating. Blackwood's attorney presented first, displaying surveys and property records supporting his client's claim to the disputed acres. He emphasized the technical aspects of boundary determination, while glossing over the timing of Blackwood's sudden interest in the property line. When Michael's turn came, he methodically dismantled their argument, presenting the original 1963 survey, alongside tribal records confirming the boundary's historical location. Most compelling was the testimony of an elderly surveyor who had personally placed the cement marker decades earlier. "That post hasn't moved in 60 years, the man stated firmly. "I set it myself, according to the original land grant specifications." The animal welfare allegations proved more emotional. Though the falsified report had been withdrawn, Blackwood's attorney argued that the sanctuary's fundamental issue remained: too many animals, inadequate resources, and an inexperienced operator. The question before this commission, he concluded, is whether these animals receive proper care, not whether documents were mishandled. Elena's testimony countered this narrative with professional authority. Her systematic assessment of the animal's health, complete with medical records and comparative photographs showing their improvement, carried undeniable weight. "I've been a veterinarian for 40 years, she stated. "The care these animals receive now exceeds standards at many commercial operations." Throughout the proceedings, Maya watched the commissioners' reactions, trying to gauge their thoughts. 3 seemed engaged and receptive. 1 appeared skeptical of both sides. The 5th, a known associate of Blackwood's, remained stone-faced. When Maya's turn to speak arrived, she approached the podium carrying a thick binder. Inside were hundreds of petition signatures gathered over the past weeks, residents from across the county expressing support for the sanctuary's mission. "Commissioners, these signatures represent your constituents," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "People who believe Whispering Pines serves a valuable purpose in our community." She presented the sanctuary's transformation, the improvements made, systems implemented, and partnerships developed. She outlined her business plan showing the path to sustainability. Most persuasively, she described the educational programs already benefiting local schools and the tribal community. "This isn't just about animals," Maya concluded. "It's about preserving something valuable for future generations, a place where we remember our connection to the land and the creatures who share it." As the hearing progressed into its 3rd hour, community members rose to speak. A science teacher described his students' enthusiasm after visiting the sanctuary. A tribal elder recounted traditional knowledge being preserved through the Heritage Breed program. Parents shared their children's experiences, learning compassion through animal interactions. Even some local ranchers, initially skeptical of Frank's operation, spoke in support. "The girl's done more with that place in a few months than many do in years," one weathered cattleman observed. "Got my respect." The most unexpected testimony came from Lisa, visibly nervous but determined as she described her role in Blackwood's scheme. I believed I was helping the animals, she admitted. Instead, I was being used to further development plans that would destroy their sanctuary. My uncle's project would replace Whispering Pines with luxury homes. She submitted internal documents confirming the development strategy had been in place for years. Blackwood's attorney objected strenuously, but the damage was done. The commissioners had heard the truth behind the property dispute, not concern for accurate boundaries, but strategic acquisition for development. As the testimony concluded, Chairwoman Garrison announced the commission would deliberate and render a decision within 24 hours. Maya left the building surrounded by supporters, their encouragement tempering her anxiety about the outcome. That evening, the sanctuary grounds felt unnaturally quiet as Maya completed the evening feeding routine. The familiar tasks calmed her mind, bringing perspective to the day's proceedings. Whatever the commission decided, these animals still needed care. The daily work would continue regardless. Elena found her in the Mustang pasture, watching the herd in the fading light. "You did well today," the older woman said. "Frank would be proud." "I just hope it was enough," Maya replied. "Whatever happens, you've already succeeded." Elena gestured toward the animals peacefully grazing. "Look at them. Look at this place. Compare it to what you found that first day." Before Maya could respond, Tyler's truck roared up the driveway. He jumped out, waving a document. They couldn't wait until tomorrow, he called, hurrying toward them. The commission voted early. 3-2 in our favor! The document contained the official ruling. The original property boundary was upheld, invalidating Blackwood's claim. More significantly, the animal welfare complaint was dismissed, with the commission specifically commending the sanctuary's improvements and community value. A handwritten note from Chairwoman Garrison accompanied the ruling. The commission will review Mr. Dawson's conduct separately. In the meantime, Whispering Pines is granted a permanent operating license, provided current standards are maintained. Maya stared at the signatures on the petition pages that had helped sway the commission. Hundreds of names representing people who believed in her mission. Some she recognized, many she didn't. Together, they had created a community voice too powerful for even Blackwood's influence to overcome. The victory wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who had contributed to the sanctuary's transformation, from Elena's veterinary expertise to Tyler's carpentry skills, from the tribal council's support to the school children's enthusiastic visits. Each person had added their strength to the effort, creating a collective force stronger than any individual could muster. As night fell, Maya carefully placed the petition in her great-uncle's desk drawer. The signatures represented more than support for Whispering Pines. They were a testament to what a community could accomplish when united by purpose and compassion. The victory celebration at Whispering Pines lasted into the evening, with volunteers, supporters, and tribal members gathering around a bonfire. Stories were shared, plans discussed, and for the first time since inheriting the sanctuary, Maya felt something approaching security. Elena found her sitting apart from the crowd, watching the festivities with quiet satisfaction. "Enjoying your triumph?" the older woman asked, settling beside her. "It doesn't feel quite real yet," Maya admitted. "After months of crisis, I'm waiting for the next emergency." Elena chuckled. "In ranching, there's always another challenge." "Speaking of which," she nodded toward the western sky, where dark clouds were building. Weather Service issued a flash flood warning. "Storm front moving in overnight," Maya frowned. "How serious?" "Potentially very. These summer thunderstorms can drop inches of rain in hours. The arroyo that crosses your lower pastures can fill quickly." The celebration ended early, as volunteers helped prepare for the coming storm. Feed was moved to higher ground, drainage channels cleared, and animals in low-lying areas relocated. By midnight, everyone had departed except Joe, who insisted on staying to help. "Seen these storms before," he said grimly. "Better to have extra hands." They made final preparations as the first lightning flickered across the distant mountains. Maya checked her great-uncle's journal for any guidance on flood management, finding detailed notes about which areas flooded first, and which routes remained passable. Longest, the storm hit with unexpected ferocity shortly after 2 a.m. Rain hammered the roof with such intensity that conversation became impossible. Wind-driven sheets of water found every gap in the barn's aging structure, creating streams across the concrete floor. By dawn, the situation had become dire. The normally dry arroyo was now a raging torrent cutting across the property, threatening to isolate the lower pastures. Water pooled in low-lying areas, rising steadily toward animal enclosures. The main road was already impassable, effectively cutting off the sanctuary from outside help. Maya and Joe worked frantically to move animals to higher ground. The sheep came willingly enough, huddling together as they were guided to safety. The goats proved more stubborn, requiring persuasion and occasionally outright carrying. Most challenging were the cattle, their massive bodies resistant to urgent direction. By mid-morning, the rain showed no sign of abating. The western fence line was underwater, and the rising arroyo threatened to breach its banks near the Mustang pasture. If it did, the powerful current could easily sweep away animals or humans caught in its path. "We need to move the Mustangs now," Joe shouted over the storm's roar. "Water's rising too fast." The wild horses presented a unique challenge. Unlike the domesticated animals, they remained suspicious of human direction, particularly in chaotic conditions. The stallion Maya had noticed from her first day paced nervously as they approached the enclosure, his herd gathering behind him. "They won't let us lead them," Maya realized. "We need to think differently." Using techniques gleaned from her great-uncle's notes, they created a pathway of open gates leading from the threatened pasture to higher ground. Rather than attempting to drive the Mustangs, they opened a route and waited, allowing the herd to discover it themselves. For agonizing minutes, nothing happened as water continued to rise around the pasture. Then the stallion cautiously approached the first open gate, testing this unexpected freedom. After careful consideration, he led his herd through, the other Mustangs following in tight formation toward safety. As Maya secured the final gate behind them, a new sound rose above the storm, the crack and groan of failing wood. The main barn door, weakened by age and the relentless water pressure, was giving way. Inside, animals that couldn't be relocated sheltered from the storm, elderly donkeys, nursing goats with kids, and chickens in elevated cages. If the door failed completely, water would surge through the structure, potentially drowning the animals or carrying them into the current. Joe and Maya fought to reinforce the buckling door, using hay bales to create a barrier against the rising water. Their efforts slowed but couldn't stop the inevitable failure, as hinges pulled from softened wood and boards warped under pressure. "It's not going to hold," Joe yelled as another board splintered. "We need to evacuate them now." The sound of an approaching vehicle drew their attention. Through the curtain of rain, Maya glimpsed a familiar black pickup truck navigating the partly flooded access road, Blackwood's vehicle. He emerged wearing rain gear, accompanied by 3 ranch hands similarly equipped. Without preamble, he assessed the failing barn door. "Need help?" he shouted over the storm. Maya's surprise must have shown on her face. "Neighboring ranchers help each other in emergencies," he said by way of explanation. Politics aside, with Blackwood's crew assisting, they managed to evacuate the remaining animals as the barn door finally gave way. Water poured through the opening, carrying debris and rising rapidly within the structure. Minutes later, part of the roof collapsed under the combined weight of water and storm damage. Throughout the day, they fought to protect what they could, moving animals to ever higher ground as the flood claimed more of the sanctuary. Maya was shocked to see Blackwood working alongside her, his expertise in water management proving invaluable as they created diversions to protect critical structures. By nightfall, the rain finally slackened. The immediate crisis had passed, though water still covered significant portions of the property. The human defenders gathered in the house exhausted but successful. Not a single animal had been lost to the flood. "Why did you help us?" Maya finally asked Blackwood as they dried off around the kitchen stove. He was silent for a moment, his usual confidence subdued. "Been ranching here 40 years. Never seen a storm like this." He glanced toward the window where darkness hid the devastation outside. "Makes you think about what matters. Property lines seem less important when everything's underwater." Before departing, he added awkwardly, "For what it's worth, I underestimated you and your operation here." The next morning revealed the storm's full impact. Fences were down across the property. Fields lay underwater or covered in debris. The main barn had sustained significant structural damage, its weather-beaten door hanging precariously from a single hinge. Yet amid the destruction, Maya found unexpected hope. The community that had supported her through the hearing now rallied around the sanctuary's recovery. Volunteers arrived throughout the day, bringing equipment, supplies, and willing hands. The tribal council sent a work crew to help repair critical infrastructure. Local businesses donated building materials. The most visible symbol of resilience stood in the center of the destruction, the main barn's battered door. Despite the pounding rain, rising flood, and structural failure around it, the door had remained partially intact, protecting the entrance even as hinges failed and boards splintered. Like the sanctuary itself, it had bent but not broken under pressure. Damaged, certainly. Transformed, undeniably, but still standing after the storm had passed. As Maya helped reattach the salvageable portions of the door, she reflected on the past 24 hours. The flood had been their final test, not just of physical infrastructure but of community support, animal management systems, and her own leadership. They had passed, emerging stronger for having weathered the storm together. The seasons turned, summer heat giving way to autumn crispness, then winter's brief chill, and finally the renewal of spring. 1 year after Maya had first arrived at Whispering Pines with nothing but a duffel bag and a property deed, she stood at the entrance to the sanctuary, watching a school bus navigate the newly graveled driveway. "Ready for this?" Elena asked, joining her as the bus came to a stop. "As ready as I'll ever be," Maya replied, straightening her shoulders. 20 children from the tribal elementary school filed out, their excited voices carrying across the morning air. Their teacher, a young woman from the reservation, organized them into a line as Maya approached. "Welcome to Whispering Pines Animal Sanctuary." She greeted them with a confidence that still occasionally surprised her. "Today you'll meet some special animals and learn about the work we do here." Leading the tour had become second nature in recent months as the sanctuary's educational programs expanded. Maya guided the children to their first stop, a demonstration area where Tyler waited with several of the more sociable goats. The kids squealed with delight as they were allowed to pet the friendly animals while Tyler explained their role in maintaining the land. "Goats are nature's lawnmowers," he told them, eliciting giggles. "They help prevent fires by eating brush that could burn during dry seasons." The tour continued to the heritage breed enclosure, where Maya incorporated traditional Apache stories about the relationship between humans and animals. The children listened with rapt attention as she connected ancient wisdom to modern conservation practices. "Our ancestors understood that humans and animals depend on each other," she explained. "When we protect these rare breeds, we're preserving living history and genetic diversity that might otherwise be lost." At the Mustang pasture, the children gathered along the fence to watch the wild horses. The stallion that had caught Maya's attention on her first day now approached cautiously, his wariness tempered by months of respectful interaction. These Mustangs are descendants of horses that have roamed free for hundreds of years, Maya told the wide-eyed children. They remind us of the importance of freedom and the responsibility that comes with caring for creatures who can't always care for themselves. After the tour, the children participated in age-appropriate chores, feeding chickens, brushing gentle horses, planting native vegetation in the sanctuary's garden. Their enthusiasm energized the normally quiet sanctuary, their laughter a reminder of why this work mattered. As the school bus departed, Maya reviewed the afternoon schedule with Elena. The high school biology class arrives at 2, then the county commissioner's tour at 4. Elena nodded approvingly. From inheritance to institution in 1 year. Quite a transformation. The transformation extended beyond programs and schedules. Physical changes marked the property everywhere Maya looked. The main barn had been rebuilt with the help of community volunteers, its structure now stronger than before the flood. Fences stood repaired and properly maintained. Water systems had been upgraded with efficient irrigation and collection mechanisms based on Frank's designs. Financial transformation had perhaps been the most surprising. The Heritage Breed program now generated steady income through breeding contracts. Educational visits provided modest but reliable revenue. A small gift shop offered items made by tribal artisans using wool from the sanctuary's sheep and photographs of the animals. Most significant was the grant Maya had received 3 months earlier, substantial funding from a conservation organization impressed by the sanctuary's integrated approach to animal welfare, environmental stewardship, and cultural preservation. The sanctuary's reputation had grown beyond the county. Regional media featured stories about their work. Universities requested research access. Tourists occasionally arrived unannounced, having read about Whispering Pines online. Even Blackwood had maintained the cautious respect that had begun during the flood. Though never exactly friendly, he now acknowledged Maya when their paths crossed in town, and his development plans had been officially withdrawn. Late that afternoon, after the commissioner's tour concluded with expressions of support, Maya walked to the northeastern corner of the property. The old boundary marker stood undisturbed, the cement post weathered but solid in its rightful place. She continued to her favorite spot, a small rise overlooking most of the sanctuary. The setting sun illuminated a landscape transformed not just by physical improvements, but by purpose. What had once been a struggling collection of rescued animals had become a functioning system. Animals, land, and people working in harmony. Joe found her there, as he often did at day's end. "Got a minute? Something to show you." He led her to his truck, retrieving a wooden sign he had carefully covered with a tarp, engraved and finished with clear sealant to weather the elements. It read, "Whispering Pines Animal Sanctuary," with smaller text beneath, "Preserving animals, land, and wisdom for future generations." Thought it was time for proper identification, he explained, suddenly self-conscious about the gift. The old ranch sign was beyond repair after the flood. Maya traced the carefully carved letters, emotion tightening her throat. "It's perfect." Together they mounted the sign at the entrance, the final acknowledgement of the property's transformation. No longer a ranch inherited by an unprepared teenager, but a sanctuary with purpose and future. That evening, Maya sat on the porch as darkness settled over Whispering Pines. The night sounds had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. Horses nickering softly, cattle shifting in their pasture, the distant howl of a coyote answered by the guardian dogs that now protected the sanctuary's perimeter. From her pocket, she withdrew the small Apache medicine pouch she had discovered that first night in her great-uncle's bedroom. Over the months, she had learned more about its significance from tribal elders, understanding it as a connection to her heritage and a reminder of responsibilities inherited alongside the land. The sanctuary's transformation reflected her own. The uncertain girl who had arrived a year ago had become a capable director, respected community member, and keeper of both animals and traditions. The skills she had developed, the knowledge she had gained, and the confidence she had built represented a personal evolution, as significant as the sanctuary's physical changes. Most importantly, Maya had found belonging, not just to a place or a purpose, but to a community that valued her contributions and supported her vision. After years as a foster child never quite fitting anywhere, she had created a home not just for animals, but for herself. As stars appeared above Whispering Pines, Maya offered silent gratitude to her great-uncle, whose legacy had provided not just land and animals, but a foundation for something greater than either of them alone could have created. 5 years had passed since Maya first stood at the gates of Whispering Pines, uncertain and alone. Now, at 22, she moved through the sanctuary with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged exactly where she was. The morning light revealed a property transformed. Gardens flourished where barren ground once lay. Sturdy fences enclosed healthy animals. Buildings stood well maintained, evidence of prosperity rather than survival. Maya paused to check a fence repair Tyler had completed the previous day. Though no longer a teenager, he remained the sanctuary's most dedicated volunteer, balancing his work there with community college studies in sustainable agriculture. Thinking about offering him the assistant director position, Elena remarked, joining Maya's inspection. At 70, Elena had officially retired again, but remained involved as board chairperson of the non-profit that now operated Whispering Pines. He's earned it, Maya agreed. Knows this place almost as well as I do. They continued their morning walk, reviewing plans for the upcoming Heritage Breed Showcase. The event would bring visitors from across the state, including representatives from similar sanctuaries looking to establish their own programs. Hard to believe how much has changed, Elena mused. Remember those first few weeks? Maya laughed. How could I forget? 200 animals, no money, and a county inspector breathing down my neck. The sanctuary now operated with a small professional staff supplemented by regular volunteers. Educational programs ran year-round, from elementary field trips to university research projects. The Heritage Breed Initiative had gained national recognition, with Whispering Pines bloodlines improving herds across multiple states. Most gratifying was the sanctuary's relationship with the tribal community. Weekly cultural programs brought elders to share traditional knowledge with younger generations. Apprenticeships provided native youth with training in sustainable ranching practices. The connection between land, animals, and Apache heritage had become the sanctuary's defining characteristic. That afternoon, Maya welcomed a special visitor, Margaret Sosi, now using a walker but still sharp-minded at 86. The council has sent me to check on our investment, she announced, with the directness that had always characterized her. Interactions, the investment was more than financial. The tribal council had designated Whispering Pines as a cultural heritage site, providing both protection and recognition that extended beyond county boundaries. Maya guided Margaret to the community center, a new building constructed to host educational programs and tribal events. Inside, a vibrant quilt hung on the main wall, its colorful patches forming a visual story of the sanctuary's journey. Each square represents one of our animals, Maya explained. Tribal members, local artists, and children from the schools all contributed pieces. Margaret studied the quilt, touching certain patches with recognition. This one is Spirit, she noted, indicating the square representing the Mustang stallion that had once regarded Maya with suspicion and now allowed her to approach within respectful distance. And here's Old Bess. Maya pointed to a patch, showing the first goat she had successfully treated under Elena's guidance. She's still with us, supervising the younger generations. The quilt told more than animal stories. It documented the sanctuary's evolution through symbolic images. The boundary marker, the barn door that had partially withstood the flood, the medicine pouch that connected Maya to her heritage. Community members had stitched their own connections to Whispering Pines into the fabric, creating a collective narrative of transformation and perseverance. As they completed the tour, Margaret's expression held approval. "Your great-uncle would be satisfied," she said simply, the highest praise she ever offered. Later that day, Maya sat with her newest challenge, a 14-year-old Apache girl, recently placed in foster care after losing her parents. Carmen had been coming to the sanctuary weekly, her initial reluctance gradually giving way to interest as Maya assigned her increasingly responsible tasks with the animals. Think you can handle feeding the special needs goats tomorrow? Maya asked, watching the girl's careful brushing of an elderly donkey. Carmen nodded, her expression serious. Elena showed me how they need to eat slowly because of their teeth. That's right. Maya recognized in Carmen the same mixture of wariness and determination she had once felt herself. Maybe you'd like to help with the weekend youth program too. We need someone who understands animals. The girl's eyes brightened briefly before caution reasserted itself. I don't know how long I'll be around. Foster homes change. The sanctuary doesn't, Maya replied gently. No matter where you live, you'll always have a place here. As sunset painted the sanctuary in golden light, Maya walked to the memorial garden established near the main entrance. A simple stone marked where they had interred her great-uncle's ashes after relocating them from the town cemetery. He belonged here with the land and animals he had loved. Maya knelt to place a small bundle of sage beside the stone. We did it, Uncle Frank, she said quietly. Everything you started, everything you believed in, it continues. The legacy extended beyond buildings and programs. It lived in the community that had formed around Whispering Pines, in the knowledge preserved and passed to new generations, in the animals thriving under thoughtful stewardship. Most significantly, it continued in the young people like Carmen, who found at the sanctuary what Maya herself had discovered, a place to belong, a purpose to embrace, and the opportunity to be part of something larger than themselves. As twilight deepened, Maya headed toward the house that no longer felt like someone else's home. On the porch waited Carmen, her usual reserve momentarily set aside as she reported excitedly about a newborn lamb she had helped deliver under Elena's supervision. Elena says I have good hands for animal work, the girl said, pride competing with her habitual caution. Said maybe I could learn veterinary skills if I'm interested. Maya recognized the spark being kindled, the same one that had ignited in her years ago, despite all the reasons it shouldn't have. The sanctuary had that effect, offering purpose to those who needed it most. If you're interested, Maya affirmed, we'll make it happen. The circle completed itself with quiet perfection, an orphaned Apache girl finding her future at Whispering Pines, just as Maya once had. Different circumstances, different challenges, but the same opportunity to transform inheritance into purpose, burden into blessing. The legacy continued, one life at a time.